Herzogenaurach. At first glance, it's the quintessential small Bavarian town, a postcard-perfect tableau of cobblestone streets, half-timbered houses, and the gentle murmur of the Aurach River. It's a place where time seems to slow, where tradition is etched into the very architecture. Yet, for decades, a silent, invisible line was drawn down the middle of this idyllic community, a division so profound it dictated friendships, marriages, and even where one bought their bread. A ghostly presence of a century-old feud still lingers in the air, a rivalry born from the bitter conflict between two brothers whose names would become synonymous with global athletic dominance. This is the story of how a family squabble tore not only a business apart but cleaved an entire town in two. For generations, Herzogenaurach was known by a peculiar nickname, the town of bent necks. It wasn't a comment on its geography or a local custom of humility. It was a deeply ingrained social reflex, a habit born from suspicion and fierce loyalty. Before engaging in conversation, before even offering a simple "Guten Tag," a resident's gaze would instinctively drop. Down to the ground. Down to the shoes. What you wore on your feet was not a matter of fashion, it was a declaration of allegiance. Were you wearing the three stripes? Or the leaping cat? In this town, your sneakers were your passport, your tribal colors, your identity. They determined if you were a friend or a foe, an ally or an other. This simple, almost subconscious gesture was the daily referendum on a conflict that had started in a small family laundry room and spiraled into a global corporate war. The intrigue of this story lies in its deeply personal, almost Shakespearean, core. It is not just a business case study of market competition, it is a human drama of brotherhood, ambition, betrayal, and pride. It is the tale of two brilliant, stubborn men, Adi and Rudi Dassler, whose shared genius first built an empire and whose shared animosity then shattered it, creating two competing dynasties, Adidas and Puma. The ripple effects of their personal war radiated outwards, turning neighbors into rivals and transforming the very social fabric of their hometown. The division was absolute. There were Adidas pubs and Puma pubs, Adidas bakers and Puma bakers. To cross the line was a quiet act of treason. Today, much of the overt hostility has faded, smoothed over by time and globalization. The town has become a pilgrimage site for sneakerheads and sports historians. A key landmark, a testament to the shared origins before the Great Schism, is the Stammhaus Dassler, the brothers' family home, which now serves as a museum and stands as one of the town's main attractions. It is a quiet monument to a time when the two titans were simply Gebrüder Dassler, the Dassler brothers. But the legacy of their split is inescapable. The global headquarters of both Adidas and Puma still dominate the town's landscape, colossal modern campuses on opposite sides of the river, physical manifestations of the chasm that separated their founders. This is where the story begins, in a small town forever marked by a family feud, a place that learned to judge a man not by the content of his character, but by the brand of shoes on his feet. The story of Herzogenaurach is the story of Adidas and Puma, a saga that proves the deepest rivalries are often the ones closest to home. Before the world knew their names, before their logos were emblazoned on the feet of champions, Rudolf and Adolf Dassler were simply the sons of a shoemaker in a town utterly consumed by the craft. Their story begins at the turn of the 20th century in Herzogenaurach, a place so saturated with cobblers that it was said there was one for every 30 of its 3,500 inhabitants. Into this world, steeped in the scent of tanned leather and wax, the two brothers were born. Rudolf, the elder, arrived in 1898, followed 2 years later by Adolf, who was known to everyone simply as Adi. Their father, Christoph, worked in a shoe factory, and their mother, Pauline, ran a small laundry service out of the back of their home, a humble setting that would later become the unlikely crucible for a global sportswear revolution. From their earliest days, the seeds of a fierce rivalry were sown. The cobbled streets and grassy fields of Herzogenaurach were their first arena. Every football match was a battle for supremacy, every footrace a test of wills. Who was the better player? Who was the swiftest runner? These were not idle childhood games, they were the opening skirmishes in a lifelong contest for dominance, a constant jostling for position that would come to define their relationship. This innate competitiveness was the engine that would later drive them to innovate and conquer the market, but it was also the fault line that would eventually cause a seismic crack in their family. They were brothers, but they were rivals first. The idyllic, if competitive, rhythm of their youth was shattered by the outbreak of the First World War, a global cataclysm that would touch them in profoundly different ways and perhaps deepen the chasm between their personalities. Rudolf, the elder, was called to fight. For 4 long, brutal years, he endured the horrors of trench warfare in Belgium, an experience that undoubtedly hardened him, making him more worldly, perhaps more cynical. Adolf, younger by 2 years, was largely spared the brunt of the conflict. He was conscripted only in the war's chaotic final months, his time in uniform a fleeting episode compared to his brother's long and arduous service. When the guns finally fell silent, 2 very different men returned to a very different Germany. The nation they came home to was a shadow of its former self, a country brought to its knees by defeat, economic ruin, and the crushing weight of the Treaty of Versailles. The atmosphere in Herzogenaurach, like the rest of the country, was one of post-war devastation and scarcity. This was an era of making do, of survival. For the Dassler brothers, it meant returning to the family trade not as a profession, but as a means of existence. In this landscape of scarcity, ingenuity became the most valuable currency. With traditional materials like quality leather being an impossible luxury, they began to fashion footwear from the detritus of war and the scraps of a broken economy. Durable soles were cut from discarded automobile tires, the uppers were pieced together from the coarse wool of old military greatcoats and the canvas from army tents. It was in this environment of desperate innovation, working in the shadow of their father's workshop, that the foundation for their future empire was laid, built not on grand designs and plentiful resources, but on the resourceful spirit forged in the aftermath of a devastating war. The embers of war had cooled, but the chill of austerity still clung to Germany. In this climate of scarcity, the Dassler family home became the epicenter of a quiet revolution. The stage for this revolution was not a grand factory or a state-of-the-art laboratory, but the humble laundry room where their mother, Pauline, had once washed the town's clothes. This small, damp shed became Adolf Dassler's sanctuary and workshop. Here, surrounded by the lingering scent of soap and the hum of makeshift machinery, the introverted, meticulous Adi began his life's work. He wasn't just mending shoes, he was reimagining them. Driven by a deep passion for sport and an intuitive understanding of an athlete's needs, he experimented relentlessly. His vision was singular and audacious, to create footwear specifically designed to improve athletic performance. This obsession led to his first great breakthrough, the invention of the spiked sports shoe. Using his cobbler skills, Adi hand-forged sharp metal studs and painstakingly attached them to the soles of leather shoes. It was a revolutionary concept, designed to give athletes an unprecedented grip on the cinders and grass of the track and field, translating every ounce of their power into forward motion. These early prototypes, cobbled together with leftover materials from the war era, were the first tangible evidence of Adi's inventive genius. He was a craftsman, an artist, and an engineer all in one, working in near isolation, driven by a vision only he could fully see. But an invention without a voice can remain a mere curiosity, and Adi's quiet, reserved nature made him ill-suited to the world of commerce. He needed a partner, a conduit to the outside world. That partner arrived when Rudolf, his elder brother, returned to Herzogenaurach. Restless and ambitious, Rudolf had journeyed to Munich with aspirations of becoming a policeman, but the path hadn't suited him. He returned home to find his younger brother not just repairing shoes, but creating the future of athletic footwear in their mother's washroom. Where Adi saw technical specifications and ergonomic designs, Rudolf saw potential, markets, and profits. He immediately grasped the magnitude of his brother's inventions. The contrast in their personalities, once a source of boyhood friction, now revealed itself as the perfect foundation for a business partnership. A powerful synergy was born. Adolf was the master inventor, the quiet soul of the operation, happiest in his workshop, constantly refining and improving his designs. He was the product man, obsessed with quality and innovation. Rudolf, on the other hand, was the extrovert, the natural salesman, a virtuoso of persuasion with a charismatic flair. He could take Adi's creations, articulate their value with compelling energy, and turn them into commercial successes. If Adi was the architect who designed the revolutionary engine, Rudy was the dynamic driver who took it out onto the open road. It was an ideal partnership, a union of complementary talents that formed a single, formidable force. Recognizing the power of their collaboration, they decided to make it official. On July 1, 1924, their enterprise was formally registered as Gebruder Dassler Schuhfabrik, or the Dassler Brothers Shoe Factory. The company was born from the confines of a laundry shed and built upon the scraps of a post-war economy. Two brothers with opposing personalities but a shared, fierce ambition had laid the cornerstone of an empire. Adi the creator and Rudi the seller, together they were poised to take on the world, unaware that the same dynamic that made them so strong would one day tear them, and their hometown, apart. With the foundation of Gebruder Dassler laid, the company embarked on a period of remarkable growth, a golden era where the brothers' combined genius transformed their small workshop into a name whispered with reverence in athletic circles. The world was their new arena, and the Olympic Games became the ultimate proving ground for Adolf's innovative designs. Their first major international triumph came at the 1928 Olympics in Amsterdam. It was there that German track and field athlete Carolina Lena Radke, wearing a pair of custom-made Dassler spiked shoes, sprinted her way to a gold medal in the 800-meter race. This victory was more than just a single win, it was a powerful proof of concept. The Dassler brothers had demonstrated to the world that their footwear wasn't just a product, it was a competitive advantage. The orders began to pour in, and the small factory in Herzogenaurach started humming with the rhythm of success. The absolute zenith of their pre-war fame, however, arrived 8 years later, against the fraught and politically charged backdrop of the 1936 Berlin Olympics. In what was a masterstroke of sports marketing and a quiet act of rebellion, Adi Dassler managed to get his shoes onto the feet of the American track and field phenom, Jesse Owens. In a stadium built to showcase Aryan supremacy, Owens, an African-American athlete, delivered a stunning rebuke to Nazi ideology by winning an incredible 4 gold medals. And on his feet for every historic victory were the lightweight, handcrafted spiked shoes from Herzogenaurach. The global exposure was immeasurable. The world watched as Owens made history, and in doing so, they also saw the distinctive footwear that carried him. It was during these games that a key visual element was first noticed, a signature mark of 2 leather stripes stitched onto the side of Owens' shoes, a nascent design that was the clear predecessor to the 3 stripes that would one day become a global icon. Yet, even as their business soared to new heights, dark clouds were gathering on the political and domestic horizons. In 1933, as Adolf Hitler rose to power, both Adolf and Rudolf Dassler made the pragmatic, if deeply compromising, decision to join the NSDAP, the Nazi Party. It was a move many business owners made to survive and operate within the new regime, but it would have profound consequences for their future. The more immediate storm, however, was brewing within the walls of the Dassler family home. The marriage of the 2 brothers introduced a new and volatile dynamic into their relationship. Rudolf married the 18-year-old Friedel in 1928, and for years, they were the sole family unit at the top. This changed in 1934 when Adi married 17-year-old Kathy, a woman whose personality was a stark contrast to the more reserved Friedel. Where Friedel was described as modest, Kathy was fiercely ambitious, confident, and explosive. She was not content to remain in the background and quickly sought to exert her influence over the family business. She saw a future for the company that was grander and more aggressive, and she was not shy about voicing her opinions or vying for power within the family hierarchy. This created an immediate and palpable tension between the 2 wives, which inevitably spilled over into the relationship between the 2 brothers. The professional partnership, which had been so perfectly balanced, was now complicated by a personal rivalry fueled by the competing ambitions of their spouses. The golden years of the Dassler brothers' shoe factory were built on a foundation of shared success, but beneath the surface, the first deep, irreconcilable cracks in the family structure were beginning to appear, foreshadowing the great schism to come. The outbreak of the Second World War brought the golden era of the Dassler brothers' shoe factory to an abrupt and brutal halt. The global stage they had conquered with athletic footwear was now a battlefield, and their business became a casualty of the conflict. The Nazi regime, prioritizing military production above all else, confiscated the factory. The machinery that had once crafted shoes for Olympic champions was repurposed, forced to churn out military equipment, including the Panzerschreck, a German anti-tank rocket launcher. The brothers' shared dream was conscripted into the war effort, its purpose twisted from celebrating human achievement to enabling human destruction. This external crisis would soon ignite the internal, personal war between Adi and Rudolf, pushing their already fractured relationship to the point of no return. The key moment, the act that planted the seeds of ultimate betrayal, came as the war progressed. Both brothers were called to serve, but their paths diverged dramatically. Rudolf was sent to the front, while Adolf, after only a short time, was recalled. The regime deemed his technical skills essential for managing the now militarized factory. He was to return to Herzogenaurach to oversee production, a move that saved him from the perils of combat. For Rudolf, stuck in the throes of the war, this was an unforgivable slight. He saw it not as a practical decision by the authorities, but as a potential machination by his own brother to seize control of the company and oust him. The resentment festered, compounded by the circulation of dark rumors suggesting Rudolf was not just a soldier, but was also involved with the Gestapo, the dreaded Nazi secret police. As the Third Reich crumbled and the war drew to a close, the animosity between the brothers erupted into a firestorm of accusations and suspicion. The precise cause of their final, irreparable break is shrouded in the fog of family secrets, giving rise to competing and sordid rumors that have been debated for decades. According to one widely circulated version of the story, the betrayal was political. After the war, during the Allied denazification process, it is alleged that Adolf, seeking to solidify his control over the company, denounced his own brother to the American authorities. He purportedly informed them of Rudolf's alleged connections to the Gestapo, an accusation that would have carried severe consequences. Another, more scandalous and deeply personal rumor, points not to political maneuvering but to a profound domestic betrayal. This version whispers that the true cause of the rift was a romantic affair between Rudolf and Adolf's ambitious wife, Kathy, a transgression that would have shattered the family to its very core. Amidst this turmoil of familial disintegration and the chaos of a collapsing nation, a remarkable episode unfolded, a moment where the brothers' past glory literally saved their future. As American troops advanced into Herzogenaurach, they had orders to level the Dassler factory. But just as they were preparing to destroy it, the soldiers learned of its history. They discovered that this was the very company that had crafted the revolutionary spiked shoes for their national hero, Jesse Owens. In an unexpected act of grace, fueled by respect for the legendary athlete who had defied Hitler in 1936, the Americans abandoned their plans. The factory was spared. The physical embodiment of the Dassler legacy survived the war, saved by the power of a symbol they had created together. The brotherhood, however, was not so fortunate. It lay in ruins, a casualty of jealousy, suspicion, and the unforgivable wounds of betrayal. The War of Nations had ended, but the War of the Dasslers was just beginning. In the chaotic aftermath of the Third Reich's collapse, the simmering distrust between the brothers escalated into open hostility, fueled by the paranoia and hardship of the post-war occupation. The final act of their partnership began with an arrest. Acting on a tip, one that Rudolf would forever believe came from his own brother, American forces took him into custody. He was sent to an internment camp for a year, a period of powerlessness and festering resentment. While Rudolf was imprisoned, convinced of Adi's ultimate betrayal, Adolf was left in sole command of their shared enterprise. He was a man with a factory to run and a family to feed, and he proved to be a masterful opportunist. With Germany under Allied control, Adi shrewdly pivoted the factory's production to cater to the needs of the occupying forces. The demand for athletic footwear had not vanished, it had merely changed its uniform. He began manufacturing baseball and basketball shoes specifically for the American soldiers stationed in the region. This not only kept the business alive but allowed it to prosper, forging a valuable relationship with the new powers in Germany. While one brother sat behind barbed wire, the other was laying the foundation for a new era of success, a fact that would become another poisoned arrow in their bitter feud. Upon Rudolf's release, any hope for reconciliation was quickly extinguished by the Allied denazification procedures. This process, designed to purge former Nazis from positions of influence, became a weapon for the brothers to wield against each other. They were called to testify about one another's wartime conduct, and they did not hold back. In a series of venomous hearings, they traded accusations, each seeking to paint the other as the more committed Nazi in a desperate attempt to gain control of the factory. The fraternal bond, already stretched to its breaking point by years of rivalry and wartime suspicion, was now irrevocably shattered in a public forum of mutual recrimination. The trust was gone, replaced by a cold, hard desire for vindication and control. The final, dramatic severing of the bond came in 1948. The partnership was formally dissolved, but the physical separation was far more personal and poignant. As the story is told, in the middle of one fateful night, Rudolf Dassler packed his belongings, gathered the employees loyal to him, and left the family home for good. He crossed the small Aurach River, which snaked through the heart of Herzogenaurach, and set up a new operation on the opposite bank. This physical act of crossing the water was a powerful, symbolic declaration. The divide between them was now as real and as permanent as the river itself. The division of the company's assets was followed by a division of its soul, the employees. The staff was forced to choose a side, a decision that would define their careers and social lives for decades to come. The split fell along the natural fault lines of the original partnership. Most of the skilled craftsmen and technicians, the men who had worked closely with the master inventor, chose to stay with Adi. The bulk of the sales and administrative staff, the people who had thrived under the charismatic and commercially minded Rudolf, went with him. The Dassler brothers' shoe factory was officially dead. From its ashes on two different sides of a small Bavarian river, two new empires were about to be born, forged in the fires of a bitter family feud. With the Aurach River now serving as a physical and symbolic border, the two brothers set about forging new identities from the wreckage of their shared past. On their respective riverbanks, they christened their new ventures, and in their chosen names, the deep-seated rivalry took on a legendary form. Adolf, ever the pragmatist, created a simple, effective portmanteau of his own nickname and surname, Adi and Das, giving birth to Adidas. Rudolf, perhaps with a mind for more aggressive and dynamic branding, initially named his company Ruda, using the same principle. He soon changed it, however, to Puma, a name that not only evoked the power, agility, and grace of the wild cat but was also, according to legend, his own nickname during his more athletic youthful days. The Dassler brothers were no more. In their place stood two titans, ready for battle. A new war required new flags. The visual identity of each brand became paramount in distinguishing friend from foe in their divided town. In a move of business acumen, Adi Dassler acquired the company's now iconic logo. He purchased the trademark for the famous three stripes from a Finnish sports brand, Karu, for a remarkably modest sum. It was a simple, yet powerful design that would soon become one of the most recognizable symbols in the world. Across the river, Puma began to develop its own visual language. In 1958, the form strip appeared, a sweeping band along the side of the shoe, designed to provide stability but also serving as a distinct brand mark. This would later be complemented in 1967 by the iconic logo of the Leaping Panther, a perfect embodiment of the company's name. The creation of these two distinct companies did more than just split a business, it cleaved the town of Herzogenaurach in two. The rivalry seeped from the factories into the cobbled streets, homes, and pubs, becoming the central, organizing principle of daily life. The town of Bent Necks was no longer just a quaint nickname, it was a stark reality of a community divided into two fiercely loyal camps. Allegiance was not spoken, it was worn. Your choice of footwear was a public declaration, and the residents of the town became walking billboards for either Adidas or Puma. To wear the wrong brand in the wrong part of town was a social transgression, an act of silent defiance. The social consequences were profound and deeply personal, weaving the corporate conflict into the very DNA of the community. A silent code of conduct emerged. Marriages between an Adidas employee and a Puma employee were deeply frowned upon, seen as a kind of familial treason. Children grew up with an inherited identity, you were not just a Schmidt or a Meyer, you were part of an Adidas family or a Puma family. This tribalism extended beyond the factory gates and into every facet of life. The two factions had their own butchers, their own bakers, and their own bars. The division was so absolute that loyalties dictated which beer one drank and which local football team one cheered for. The Aurach River was no longer just a body of water, it was an ideological border, and for the next several decades, the residents of Herzogenaurach would live their lives on one side of a Cold War fought with leather, rubber, and laces. As the world entered a new decade, the rivalry between Adidas and Puma escalated from a local feud into a full-blown global conflict. This was their Cold War, a period of intense, indirect warfare fought not with armies, but with athletes, innovations, and audacious marketing coups. The battleground was the world's playing fields, and the prize was international supremacy. The competition spurred a technological arms race. with each brother's company relentlessly pushing the boundaries of athletic footwear. Puma, in particular, became known for its daring experiments, pioneering innovations like screw-in studs that allowed athletes to adapt their footwear to different weather conditions, and developing advanced orthopedic insoles to improve comfort and performance. Every new invention was a volley fired across the river, compelling an immediate and powerful response from the other side. The unspoken rules of engagement were shattered in the run-up to the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. In a rare moment of détente, the two companies had reportedly made a secret agreement, a Pelé pact. Recognizing the Brazilian superstar's immense global stature and the astronomical cost of a bidding war, they agreed that neither company would attempt to sign him. It was a fragile truce in a long and bitter war. But Rudolf, ever the opportunist, saw a chance for a decisive blow. In a clandestine move, he broke the pact. Puma secretly approached Pelé and paid him a substantial sum to wear their shoes and, more importantly, to create a moment of unforgettable advertising. The plan worked to perfection. Just before the opening whistle of the final match, Pelé famously paused and bent down to tie his shoelaces, giving millions of television viewers around the world a deliberate, unmissable close-up of his Puma sneakers. The move was a marketing masterstroke that brought Puma worldwide recognition and became a legendary, if infamous, chapter in the history of sports marketing. As for the cash Pelé received, a charming anecdote suggests he was so wary of banks that he stored the money from the deal in his flower pots at home. The conflict reached a fever pitch on their home soil during the 1974 World Cup, held in West Germany. The battle to become the official supplier for the national team, Die Mannschaft, became a deeply personal crusade. The bitter rivalry between the two Herzogenaurach companies threatened to tear the team apart before a single ball was kicked. The negotiations and internal disputes became so toxic and divisive that, in a shocking turn of events, the team nearly packed their bags and abandoned the tournament altogether. In the end, a deal was struck, and Adidas emerged victorious. For Rudolf Dassler, this was more than a business victory, it was an intensely personal triumph. Securing the national team in his own backyard was, in his eyes, a definitive win over his brother. This era of intense competition was rife with paranoia and suspicion, leading to rampant industrial espionage. The atmosphere was one of deep-seated distrust, where every innovation was seen as a potential secret to be stolen. In the Puma headquarters, it was common practice to acquire Adidas shoes and literally cut them to pieces, dissecting them layer by layer to reverse-engineer their rivals' latest technological advancements. Across the river at Adidas, the paranoia was equally extreme. In one chilling episode, a manufacturer of industrial adhesive was nearly shot by Adidas personnel. They had become convinced that he was a spy for Puma, secretly leaking their trade secrets about shoe construction. The incident, though extreme, perfectly captured the poisonous climate of the time. The brothers' war was at its peak, a global conflict fueled by a hatred so profound that it saw spies in every shadow and traitors in every business dealing. The relentless war of brands, a conflict that had spanned nearly 3 decades and defined two globally recognized empires, was finally confronted by a force that neither brother could outmaneuver or defeat: mortality. In the autumn of 1974, Rudolf Dassler was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. The dynamic, aggressive founder of Puma, the man who had battled his brother for control of markets and the loyalty of athletes, was now fighting a final, unwinnable battle for his own life. As his health rapidly declined, the prospect of his imminent death cast a long shadow over Herzogenaurach, prompting a final, desperate effort to heal the wound that had torn the family and the town apart. The mantle of peacemaker fell to 2 men, Rudolf's son, Armin, and the local priest, Siegbert Kieleing. They embarked on a mission of immense emotional gravity, attempting to broker a deathbed reconciliation between the two estranged patriarchs. The priest, acting as a neutral intermediary, engaged in a form of shuttle diplomacy, moving between the homes of the two brothers, carrying messages and gauging the possibility of a final meeting. For a brief moment, it seemed as if a lifetime of animosity might finally give way to a shared sense of humanity. A flicker of hope emerged from the priest's efforts. As Father Kieleing later recounted, the desire for peace was not one-sided. "I went from one brother to the other and discussed a meeting with them," he recalled. Both wanted to reconcile. This revelation is perhaps the most tragic element of the entire saga. Beneath the thick, hardened layers of pride, betrayal, and decades of bitter competition, there apparently remained a mutual, if fragile, wish to find peace. The priest's words suggest that both men, facing the finality of their separation, felt the pull of their shared blood and their common past. The stage was set for a powerful, poignant act of forgiveness, a final meeting that could have rewritten the ending of their story from one of perpetual conflict to one of last-minute grace. The intermediary had done his work, the decision now rested with Adolf. But the chasm, dug over 30 years of relentless hostility, proved to be too wide to cross, even at the very edge of the grave. When Father Kielang approached Adolf with the news that his dying brother wished to see him, he was met with a final, unyielding wall of resentment. The years of perceived betrayals, the accusations during denazification, the broken Pelé pact, the countless personal and professional slights, had calcified into an anger that even the specter of death could not soften. Adolf refused. He would not go to his brother's bedside. Instead, he sent a message back with the priest, a message that was both a hollow gesture of piety and a final, devastating act of personal rejection. His words were precise, cold, and unforgettable: "I will not come. But you can tell my brother that I forgive him, but I do not want to see him." Forgiveness was offered, but presence was denied. It was an abstract pardon, delivered from a distance, devoid of the warmth, empathy, and closure that only a final, face-to-face farewell could have provided. The last chance for reconciliation was lost. The War of the Dassler brothers would not end with a handshake, but with an empty chair by a deathbed. On October 27, 1974, Rudolf Dassler succumbed to his illness. The founder of Puma was gone, and the news echoed across the Aurach River, a final, silent message to his estranged brother. Yet, the finality of death did not bring the closure of forgiveness. When the day of the funeral arrived, the town of Herzogenaurach watched and waited, but Adolf Dassler did not come. He remained on his side of the river, a final, public affirmation of the unbridgeable gulf between them. The rivalry had been so absolute that it transcended the veil of death itself. The Dassler brothers would not be reunited, not even in grief. For the next 4 years, Adolf Dassler was the sole remaining patriarch of the global sportswear dynasty that had begun in his mother's laundry room. He continued to live as he always had, with a relentless drive and an unwavering focus on his creation. The absence of his lifelong rival did not seem to soften him or slow him down. He remained the heart and soul of Adidas, a formidable figure who, even in his final years, embodied the athletic spirit he championed. Well into his 70s, his personal discipline was legendary. At 75, he was still a regular on the tennis court and swam laps in his pool, maintaining a vigor that mirrored the tireless energy of his company. He was involved in the day-to-day affairs of the firm right up until the very end, his passion for innovation and quality undiminished by age. Then, on September 6, 1978, Adolf Dassler died from a stroke. The last of the founding brothers was gone, and an era came to a definitive close. With his passing, the deeply personal, first-generation conflict that had fueled the creation of two global giants was over. The two men who had started as partners, become bitter enemies, and transformed an entire industry were both silenced. Their final resting place serves as the most poignant and powerful symbol of their life story. Both Adolf and Rudolf Dassler were buried in the same cemetery in their hometown of Herzogenaurach, forever bound to the soil that had birthed their ambitions. But even in death, they remain apart. Their grave sites were deliberately placed at the extreme opposite ends of the cemetery grounds. They share the same final piece of earth, but they face away from each other, separated by a vast expanse of lawn and stone, a silent, enduring testament to a brotherhood that was born together, but would remain, for all eternity, divided. With the passing of both founding brothers, the deeply personal nature of the rivalry began to fade, replaced by a more conventional corporate competition. The leadership of Adidas and Puma passed from the patriarchs to their families, and eventually, as the companies grew into publicly traded behemoths, control was handed over to professional managers and corporate boards. The raw, emotional feud that had been fueled by fraternal hatred evolved into a structured, market-driven contest for global dominance. The war was no longer about family pride, it was about shareholder value. For decades, the invisible wall in Herzogenaurach remained, a stubborn relic of a bygone era. But as generations passed, the old animosities began to soften. Finally, in 2009, an event took place that would have been unthinkable to Adi and Rudy. In a powerful symbolic gesture orchestrated to mark the UN's International Day of Peace, the employees of Adidas and Puma met on a football pitch. For the first time in 61 years, since the Great Schism of 1948, the two camps played a friendly match together. It was a simple game, but its significance was profound. The handshake between the two CEOs at midfield represented a public truce, a formal end to the Cold War that their founders had waged until their dying days. The town of bent necks could finally look up. Perhaps the most telling sign of this new era is a story of modern, familial irony that brings the Dassler saga full circle. Frank Dassler, the grandson of Puma founder Rudolf Dassler, now holds a senior position not at his family's company, but at the firm created by his great-uncle. He serves as the chief legal counsel for the Adidas Group. His very presence within the Adidas headquarters is a testament to how much has changed. Frank himself has offered the most succinct and insightful epitaph for the entire conflict, acknowledging both its personal cost and its professional benefit. "My grandfather and his brother remained enemies until the end of their days," he has stated, which is very sad from a family point of view, but good for business. His words capture the ultimate paradox of the Dassler story. The bitter, lifelong feud was a source of immense personal tragedy, shattering a family and dividing a town. Yet, that same relentless, unforgiving rivalry acted as a crucible, a high-pressure forge that drove both companies to innovate, to compete, and to become stronger. In their quest to defeat each other, the two brothers inadvertently spurred one another on to achieve unparalleled global success. Today, the headquarters of both Adidas and Puma still stand on opposite sides of the Aurach River, permanent monuments to their founders' genius and their animosity. They have transformed the small, unassuming town of Herzogenaurach into the undisputed world capital of the sports industry, a lasting legacy built on the foundations of a brotherhood that was tragically, and profitably, broken.